is a series where I highlight the people, places, and projects that made America the 250-year-old social entity that it is. So what I do with this is I started at the July 4th, the 250th celebration of the United States, these United States of America, and I decided to go through every decade, every 10 years, and pick people, projects, and places. And I've done that up to now 1836 until 1846. That's what we're going to be covering in this one. You can check out the other ones in George Washington and reading the Constitution. We're doing a bunch of different other things with it, talking about different things in different projects. And then there's a speed drawing going on the screen if you're reading the video version of this. And there's also the ability to have some t-shirts and merchandise. I want to have those going with all these and each time do a different thing. Might be 2 for this one. So before I highlight the main person I'm going to be highlighting in this one, it's a person and a project in a way. It's two for one in that kind of sense. I'm going to just talk about a few other things that happened in between 1836 and 1846 in the United States of America. This series has regularly featured people that were presidents. Like in the previous one, there was Andrew Jackson, but as we keep going, there will be fewer and fewer people who were presidents at the time we're highlighting or later in their life. There's definitely going to be some presidents and Honest Abe is probably going to be the one during the years. I don't know if it's going to be from the Emancipation Proclamation or getting assassinated. I could actually use John Wilkes Booth there instead because that's kind of a major thing. Anyway, so we might do like a scene for that one versus just a single person image with the kind of design that's going on the screen right now. But if you've seen the design on the screen, some of you might already know who that person is. But coming back to this. So Andrew Jackson was in the previous one. And then there was also somebody mentioned who I'm going to go this thing where I think I need to discuss more than just the main person that's in there, because John Quincy Adams was also president before this president we're going to talk about in this series. John Quincy Adams was the first son of a former United States president himself. And then that didn't happen again until George W. Bush. But then Martin Van Buren, who was the 8th president of the United States of America in 1837 to 1841, he was the first president who was born as an American citizen. So you could kind of ask and wonder, were they really Americans before? You know, that whole thing we're talking right now, the immigration and whatnot, you got to be born in America, there's birthright citizenship, those things are being discussed. But George Washington, he was not born in the United States of America. Was he a naturalized citizen after he became the first president? How did that happen? And that was something that was changed in the Constitution, where now you have to have been born in the United States of America in order to be president of the United States of America. But before, there wasn't a United States of America to be born in, so that wasn't really a thing that happened with some people at the start. So this is kind of cool. The first one was 1837, took the 8th president before you had an American-born president. That's just something that was kind of cool and worth noting. Then John C. Calhoun was someone who championed state rights and nullification, driving the growing wedge between the North and the South. So this had been discussed in a previous one. I think it was it 2 episodes ago, or 2 parts ago? Some parts previous, we talked about Eli Whitney and the cotton gin, and how some of the cotton gin was stolen. The idea was stolen from him. And that was a way that created more efficiency in the plantations, and then kind of embedded slavery for longer. That's what some people estimated. But then since they stole that idea from him, he went up to the North and he created this system of interchangeable parts. And due to that ability of taking that on and not having the slaves working on certain ways, the North adapted more to technology and different sorts of advancements. And that led them having a more capable economy and system, manufacturing and whatnot, to get more weapons, more materials, to handle the actual supply chains that are needed in order to actually maintain a war. So he was somebody who his inventions, used by other people in one hand, some people argue cemented slavery for longer than it would have been. It was too exorbitantly expensive at that time. And it still is. If you actually look into it, slavery is just more expensive than actually having people who are there willing to work using the same sorts of tools would just be more efficient. But it also created some sort of handicap to the South where they were too focused on that rather than developing their systems because they were relying on slave labor in a sense. And then the North wasn't doing that. And then they had the ability to actually advance and come in and take out the slave owning South and things like that. So this is that there. Now, there's one here. I could have highlighted this, the Trail of Tears, which is a place or event. And that was the tragic forced relocation of the Cherokee Nation and other native tribes westward to present-day Oklahoma. And the Cherokee experience, that was the most widely recognized segment, involved the forced march of the Cherokee Nation from 1838 to 1839, where roughly 4,000 of the 16,000 removed individuals perished. Yes, the people were savage in their own ways compared to the people who are today. Even the Westerners, even the Americans, the white people were also more savage than they are today. That's just the past in general. The past is just, in general, more savage than we are today. We advance, we find more peaceful ways to flourish, and we start doing some of these things. And one of the things about the United States of America is I think it's one of the nations, being a post-myth state, that does the best out of many into actually studying and discussing the negative things that happen with it. It's not good to paste these things over. I don't buy into that whole thing like, oh, America doesn't talk about these things. Most countries who've done similar sort of things don't really talk about it nearly as much as this. And in many cases, it's not even written down. It's not even known to be a thing. It's just been completely whitewashed from the histories, from the mythologies of how those countries started. But the United States of America, I think, does a decent enough job at facing these things. Of course, more can be done. This stuff is horrific. I don't think people are celebrating that this happened, but it's also not unique that it happened. But I think it is relatively unique, the ability for people to actually study it in that way. And then you have younger countries where people are still living among the people who founded or created the current nation in the way that it actually is. Like here in Kenya, we still have family members, sons of the people who were the founding fathers, who fought for independence, who fought for independence from the colonial times, who are still involved in politics. And so it's a different sort of thing where you're going to have a different sort of history, like the history is actually being written and like the idea of the nation still being developed. But to have a already developed, built up nation like the United States of America that does this sorts of actual introspection into its history, the good and the bad, I think is a positive thing. We need to go away from the American dream, American nightmare, into the American reality. What is the reality of America today and what can it go to the future? And that's part of this series. Okay, the next one, now this is one that is more like mythologized in a way. It's one of those moments where it's like the Alamo in Texas. So this is the mission in San Antonio where Texan defenders made a historic stand against the Mexican forces in 1836. So some people kind of joke around like Mexico's taking back like Texas and California and these places, but these places were actually Mexican. Like there was actually like a Mexican nation in a sense, and then the United States of America kind of went in there and started taking some of these territories back. Won it in. Okay, so now in these kind of cases, they talk about how, oh, the white people came in, these are not their land, you're not native here. But then when it comes to the Mexicans, yes, some of them are descendant from the natives, but there's also a lot of mixture of the Spaniards that came in and the people who are running the place right now. I don't know how much that discourse still exists in those countries of like, oh, you Mexicans mixed with the gringos and stuff like that, gringo blood, are not actual natives. We need to have this land given back to the natives. I don't know if they have that. Do they have that actually? Let me just double check that if they have reservations in Mexico for the actual natives. Okay, just ask Brave. It's my browser that I use. I use Brave browser and then I use the Brave search as well. Okay, so it says no, Mexico does not have reservations in the legal sense used in the United States and Canada, where indigenous groups hold sovereign status and distinct legal jurisdiction. Instead, indigenous lands in Mexico are governed by the ejido system or recognized as communal territories where land ownership typically remains of the nation rather than individual tribes. The legal framework under Mexico's ley agraria, agrarian law, these lands are subject to national law and indigenous communities do not possess the same level of political sovereignty or independent judicial systems found in the U.S. reservations. And that is something that's might be rather exceptional, where you just have your own nations within still the most powerful nation in the world. Like, you're not going to be attacking the Navajo Nation anytime soon. So technically, they could stay in these reservations and continue and build up their own cultures in their own laws, in their own rules, in that kind of sense. And I'm actually not really against that. Like, I think, what if you had that more with more recent people? If you just had, like, okay, this place has a Muslim enclave. It has, like, Sharia law in this kind of place. Okay, this place is a Kenyan enclave. It has, like, let's say Kikuyus. The Kikuyus are doing their tribal stuff and that kind of things. I don't kind of mind that whole idea of having these enclaves, these areas where you want to do things the way you'd want to do them. As long as you have this voluntary sort of situation where you don't, not being forced to be there, you kind of leave. The Amish are kind of doing something like that. Ostensibly, yes, they still are subject to the laws of, like, Pennsylvania or whatever areas that they're in, but they have their own sorts of communities and they have their own legal systems where they don't necessarily are quick to go to the government, federal or state systems. They'd rather try and supply those in their own. There's some negatives to that. There's some positives to that. And I think I'm not necessarily against that. So, historical context: the early Mexican government pursued policies of assimilation to merge indigenous people into the general mestizo population, resulting in a lack of formalized segregated native reserves. Cross-border exceptions: some indigenous nations such as the Tohono O'odham and Kickapoo span the U.S.-Mexico border, while the U.S. members have reservation rights. Their counterparts in Mexico are integrated into the nation's framework without separate sovereign land bases, though they may have specific rights to cross the border for cultural purposes. Okay, so there you have it on that. What do y'all think about that? Because there is a level of segregation that's involved in here. I'm not against discrimination. I'm not against having those things. That's how we have actual diversity. You can actually choose, like, I don't support the way this is done, so I don't want to associate with the way that's done. Let me go do the way I want to do things over there, and you don't have to come over there if you don't like the way I'm doing things. That is a completely positive thing. And there is an aspect of the modern regressive left in the United States of America that is sort of pushing this thing. They almost kind of would like if there's, like, reservations of Black college students. You go to a Black school, that's the Black dorm. This is a Black graduation. These are the Black classes. They need to be taught by Black teachers. They need a Black, like, psychologist to come to them. If they go to the hospital, the university hospital, they should be Black doctors there. There should be Black everything for the Black people in the United States of America. Like, they're almost living in their separate reservations. And the white people can go and do their things in white people lands with white people things and white people with, like, activities. I don't know. It seems to be something that's pushing that. And like I said, I'm not against the concept, but I just find it kind of interesting that you have these people talking about, oh, we actually want to be together with people, but then they're actually pushing policy that is very segregationist in that kind of sense. But then the reservations, is that something worth encouraging? Or is it better to say, like, what the Mexicans did by just integrating the populations into the mestizos? Is that, like, a preferential sort of situation? I don't know. What do y'all think out there? But now let's get to the person who is the main highlight of this time's 1836 to 1846 of Made America 250, and that is Samuel Morse. And you heard from the start of this video, that was Made America 250 in Morse code. And Morse code was named after Samuel Morse, who was also the inventor of the single-wire telegraph and co-developer of Morse code, revolutionizing communication. Morse conceived the idea of the telegraph in 1832, and with the help of partners Alfred Vail and Leonard Gale, demonstrated the first working model in 1838. I'm going to get more into this inventiveness of the United States of America. We already talked about Eli Whitney, where he created the cotton gin, then he went on and created the interchangeable parts, that sort of thing. Like, he was very creative in that kind of sense. Now, doesn't mean all Americans are creative, but so much inventiveness has come from people living in the United States of America. And we'll get into that more. But, like, just this one is another key thing with this one. It's like, I think there's a part here where you had the freedom of speech enshrined in the Constitution. It's a key part in there. So people had more reason to communicate and share their thoughts and talk about things and have ideas, and then lean into that kind of mentality, that kind of need. There was a demand. We want to talk more about, this could be nonsensical things, but it could also be really in-depth things. But anyway, so use that kind of system, and then that creates a system where now there's need and demand for more forms of communication to communicate in new ways. You had the landscape, you have people going out to different places, trying to do different things in different ways. So you had this man and these men come together and create this telegraph. So a bit of the independent development going on as it was also a bit of independent. So this is not just the United States of America. I'm not saying any of this is just a United States of America thing, because when it comes to the telegraph, there was also development going on as William Fothergill, with William Fothergill Cook and Charles Wheatstone patented a 5-needle system in 1837 that uses multiple wires to deflect magnetic needles to specific letters, becoming the standard for the British railways. So that's a similar sort of thing that was happening in the United Kingdom at the same time, around the same time as the telegraph was being invented in the United States of America. And considering the time this was, I don't think this was a thing where they stole an idea and then went over there. Yes, okay, they conceived the idea of the telegraph and then developed the first working model in 1838. So that's shortly after. So I don't think they even took the model from like the people in the UK and then brought it here. It's just there were certain demands and certain needs going on in different places in the world where there was this. So yeah, like I mentioned, it's not just the demand of the freedom of speech and the ability to speak more that led to this development, but that's a part of it. That's one thing I'm wondering, is that a part of it? What is it about America that makes that be the place where so much inventiveness has come? Why have so many people invented so many things from the United States of America? And is that something that made, that I think that definitely is something that made America the place that it is today, but what is it to make something in America? What about America leads people to make things? And that's something I think with this series, I'm kind of asking, like, how are you going to make America what it was intended to be, what it could be? And you need to change some of the things around. And I think some of that is that inventiveness. And we'll see that some of that might have changed a bit. Okay. So Samuel Morse patented his single-wire electromagnetic telegraph in 1837 and developed Morse code that allows efficient transmission over a single wire. So you have the single wire there versus the 5 wires of Fothergill Cook and Wheatstone, a 5-needle system. Okay, so that's a different one. Using multiple wires to deflect magnetic needles. Okay. The first public demonstration in the US occurred on May 24th, 1844, when Morse sent the message, "What hath God wrought?" from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, Maryland, inaugurating the era of instant long-distance communication. So we're having this back there, and then now I'm recording this in Nairobi, Kenya, while I'm searching this information online that is just going in different places. There's satellites involved in this, and there's all sorts of just newfangled things going on that just really change the world. I wonder what Samuel Morse would think about the world today and what sort of stuff. Did he have a mentality where he invents things in any time and place, or was it just a confluence of events at that particular time and he wouldn't have the ability to invent anything else besides that? That's kind of a thing to wonder. But let me find these articles that I'd found. I think I'll just read the one. There was another one I had a tab open and deleted it, and I think we need them both. This one should capture enough of kind of what I'm getting at and thinking at with this Made America 250 entry. So whatever happened to American inventions, and this is from the Washington Times, written by Michael McKenna with the subheading, we're rerunning 60-year-old accomplishments in space. The Artemis 2 trip around the moon has generated a lot of enthusiasm in the past few days. I guess that makes sense. It has been a while since we were there, and the new NASA chief has been talking about the moon bases that will, one imagines, be super cool, even if it remains uncertain what they might accomplish. It all sounds very exciting, but in a larger sense, it's kind of depressing. We have already done this. In 1968, Apollo 8 circled the moon on a mission that went through the heart of the Christmas season. On Christmas Eve, the crew read the first 10 verses of Genesis to about 1 billion people. About 1 in 4 people then alive, watching back on Earth. That's pretty awesome. Another thing we're just talking about recently with the inventions. I mean, other people have been talking about this as well. But now with the invention of this technology and all these forms of communication, you have these moments where now you have so many different things you can discuss, you can view, you can watch. Back in the day, even back in my day when I was younger, you could have like 3 or 4 channels on the television. So every week, if you were watching something you were interested in TV, there's chances like everyone at your school or everyone at your workplace was pretty much watching the similar sort of thing. So you had these cultural touchstone moments. But then now you have all these different niches thing where it's like, I could watch takeoffs all the time, regular takeoffs of rockets going off all the time. But most of the people I might meet on a day-to-day basis may not know there was a rocket launch the day before because they're busy watching the Kardashians, or they're busy watching some NFL preseason, or somebody else is watching politics in a different nation. So there's all sort of thing where we might have lost some of these cultural touch points due to the inventiveness of all these other ways. But at the same point, I could probably still find more people to talk to more in depth about those rocket things online with different niche communities that I don't have to have them in person right there at the office, or just make sure like I'm at a school where enough kids happen to be into rockets. So even though we might have all watched it, I need to be lucky enough that enough kids there, at least one kid, can talk in depth about these other questions I have of it. But then now, like, if I don't have the kid in school, I can just go online and find people online who are answering those questions. Yeah. Okay. So back to this. That sort of attention was not unusual. We all watched the Apollo launches and landings and kept track of NASA's progress. We were proud when Americans landed men on the moon. We watched and prayed for the Apollo 13 crew. With that as context, it is a bit discouraging to think that despite all the hoopla, we are rerunning accomplishments from 60 years ago. It's not just NASA. Despite all the noise and enthusiasm for technology in our society, the simple truth is that we are not living through the age of inventions, at least not inventions that materially change our lives. I can hear the question now. What about artificial intelligence? It has been 80 years since the computer was invented at the University of Pennsylvania. Has the computer changed our lives? Absolutely, but not so much in the past 30 years or so. Have people always cribbed from smarter sources? Yep. Have cars improved? No doubt. But they are still cars, still very much like their predecessors of a century ago. Are cell phones really that big and advanced, given that we had walkie-talkies in the 1940s? Okay, I'm going to say some of these things. Like, a cell phone is a very different animal than a walkie-talkie. I think, yes, that one has really changed. I had my nephews over today. They normally come over on Wednesdays to have dinner. And we have family dinners at that time. And then we were just going through some old magazines or looking at a GamePro from 1998 and just thinking about how like gaming itself. And this part of this is a storytelling platform that I'm starting. This Made America 250. I Know Great People, this Dying Alive channel, a bunch of different things. I'm just really interested in telling stories. And I think gaming is one of the best ways to tell stories. And it's something that we did even before we had this technology. Gaming is just a way we communicate and figure out things in reality. So I'm really into that. But then I was just looking at the technology. Like right now, PlayStation, Sony is actually dropping digital games. And I think like 4 years ago, I became like PC master race. And also dealing with some poverty issues where folks weren't really spotting things, and I haven't really been that financially successful. So I haven't been the ability to just get games and get a stock of like physical games. So I was never really much into collecting them. I still have some old Super Nintendo games, still have some old Nintendo cartridges, still have some old PlayStation games and things like that, the discs, but I've never really been too big into that. And once I switched to PC, I'm completely okay with Steam and just downloading games in that kind of sense where you're pretty much renting a game. So personally, I've kind of gone away from that. But then some people are really upset that Sony is deciding in PlayStation 6 to stop having physical games because they're just like, this is not what's done anymore. Like, it's not how we do it. And this person, again, talking about the cell phones. So many people play games on cell phones, like really hardcore games, really pretty decent games on their cell phones. And walkie-talkie is such a different animal. Like, I just remember like the Game Gear coming out and like, was it the Game Gear, Sega Game Gear? I think it was called the Game Gear with the first handheld. It might have been called something else. But anyway, so remembering all those old games that in that GamePro from 1998, I saw an ad for Riven, which is the sequel to Myst. And Myst was just a game where you just pretty much go around and you'd click different things. It was pretty much just all story driven. And that was an amazing game at the time. The graphics were like, wow, this is so amazing, because people were coming from Atari and 8-bit Nintendo. So to see Myst on a computer, that was like, wow. I was like, remember back in the day being like, yo, I wish I had a computer that could run Myst. And now it's like, and it was ported over to PlayStation. But they were advertising that Myst game as a 5-disc game. They're like, 5 discs deep. Like, having multiple discs was considered a massive game. Like, I think I have a Star Ocean game that had multiple discs. Final Fantasy VII, which I think I was on multiple discs as well when it first came out on PlayStation. Remember, that was, to me, one of the first things was like, wow, this is amazing. And I just saw this thing of the graphics of Final Fantasy VIII with Cloud, Aerith talking to Cloud, We got a chocobo on his shoulder with the old Final Fantasy VII PlayStation graphics, and then the remake that's coming out in PC now. That's in like a 3-part. So anyway, so what I'm just saying is like I'm looking at the development that has come from like my first playing of an Atari 2000 while I was here in Nairobi, Kenya, not too far from where I live right now in Westlands, and then now being there with my nephew who was like 8 and another one 6, no, 11 and 6, and then they're going through those magazines. I'm reading those magazines. Just remember like when I was like initially. I got those magazines once I got to the States, but just like initially getting the Atari and just being like, wow, looking at the games and the development that's happened there. I think, I don't know how old Michael McKenna is here, but I think he might just be too, he might be, he looks kind of middle-aged, my age too. He might be a bit older than I am, but I don't, like, I think he's underestimating how much the changes have actually been in some of these things. I think it's relatively significant, but again, it's his opinion. But anyway, I'm just saying with some of these changes and the things that he's mentioned, I think they have changed a lot. I think they've really changed a lot. Okay, so back to the reading. In comparison, from 1875 to 1950, the world changed dramatically. Steel, machine guns, airplanes, jets, rockets, automobiles, electricity, air conditioning, movies, oil refining, vaccines, penicillin, the assembly line, that list goes on. The list goes on. What has been invented since 1950? Nuclear power, the pill, and the internet? Which wasn't an invention so much as an innovative way to use telephone lines. Not much, really. And certainly nothing that has changed how we've lived our lives as much as the inventions of the previous 75 years. Now, again, this is, he's really sleeping on the internet. He's really sleeping on the effect of the internet. And this might be in part because like he saw it come and start and he still remembers a life before the internet. But I think the people who actually have grown up with the internet who just take that stuff for granted, the sort of things that are being done is insane. Like there's a certain things that are not necessarily going to be effective. It's such a new invention to have information itself, the sharing of information itself, the ability to speak to people itself, just like the telegraph. Some people are like, well, I mean, the telegraph is just, what was so new there? That's just a new way of using like smoke signals. I was like, what does really matter? You can communicate with people in different ways. I don't necessarily think that would be really a thing to really admit, like, and then what the internet creates, the ability to communicate, the inventions that can come because you can communicate with other people in a better way. Just like I'm saying, like the telegraph that came out and that ability to communicate information, get better transportation of resources from one place to another one, that sort of thing just is world changing. Like the effects of those aren't immediately felt, but the actual knock-on effects of something like that is pretty wild. Like even just like right now, just using whatever small AI and Brave AI that went there and asked them about the Mexico thing and I'm giving you that information. I could have done it in the past by, of course, before internet, going to a library and getting the books out and whatnot and finding the information and preparing that and putting it out there. Or I could have gone in and this one before like the AI was integrated into search engines and whatnot, whatever you want to call it, augmented interface in that kind of sense. You could have a thing where I'd have to go in and find things and edit them down and do that. But now I could just get that and give you that information right there. And that's a question I had in my mind. And before I'd have probably just said, okay, I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to pass it on. But because I know it's pretty straightforward to get it, I could put that information into this presentation, into this video. And now it's a question that is not going to just like, I do think there's a thing, if you have a question in your mind and then you don't necessarily answer it, once you've had that question, I think your mind kind of wants the answer. And if you don't address that answer in some cases, it might still be like a small tab open in your mind. But now that I've answered it, I can close that tab and like, I don't know. I just think like not answering questions kind of weighs you down. But I think the ability of having augmented interface that people call artificial intelligence, that is not really intelligence, that kind of thing has helped in that way of just like answering certain questions in certain ways in a more streamlined way. And I think there is positives to that. And yes, I could go in and research. This might all be wrong with the AI, but regardless, I think you kind of get what I'm saying. I think this man is underestimating the effect of the internet and whatever large language models applications in the way that they're actually being applied to now are. Because like, is steel really that different? Is that just a different way of using iron and what is it? Iron and copper? What goes into steel? Iron and copper? I'm trying to think of like Valheim, or like I was recently playing, again, not the games that you play. I was recently just playing, and I'm going to be playing Valheim with my same friend Derek, but I recently just played through the Mines of Moria with him, where you're going in and your doors, and you're going into like Moria, you're recovering Moria and stuff like that. Khazad-dûm, I really like that name, Khazad-dûm. Such a cool name of a thing. But I'm trying to think, what do you get to create steel? I think iron and copper and you smelt it together, and then that's how you create steel in that game. So I think those two. So is that just a different way of using metal? Like, what's the difference? There's a significant difference between steel and what you can do with steel and what you can do with iron or copper by itself. Like, there's significant differences with these things. So if that's a major thing, that's pretty big. The pill has had really huge changes to just social dynamic between the sexes, between the genders, between the sexes, between the men and women. Just the ability to control reproduction in that kind of sense has had massive social effects. We still haven't fought those yet. Nuclear power, again, that's a thing that it would have been entirely different if the United States of America didn't find the inventiveness to invent the bombs and be in the position to drop those bombs. And that has changed the way nuclear power has been understood and affected in the rest of the world, and it should be applied more. And there's a lot more, like the stage, like, not phase 3. 1 second. The generation 3, not phase 3. The generation 3 nuclear reactors. They use like light water reactors designed to succeed generation 2, featuring evolutionary improvements such as thermal efficiency, passive safety systems, standard designs, and the 60-year operational time. So I was doing some shorter videos also now with the Center for Industrial Progress, which is done by Alex Epstein, who is about human flourishing. He focuses on things that encourage human flourishing. What do the actions humans do, and do they encourage human flourishing? And for the key thing of that is reliable energy. Not unreliable energy like solar and all these other things that people are pushing in certain ways to save the earth in that kind of sense, but just nuclear, clean nuclear, generation 3 that is relatively safe. We've had a few nuclear accidents with the reactors, with those generation 1s, with those early technologies. And then you have the association of the atom bombs, and you have the place where the people are testing bombs here and there in the world. So there is an understandable fear of those, but it is not necessarily accepted. Now, another positive thing with artificial intelligence, even though the technology itself might not necessarily be that positive, due to the amount of money and potential with this, when you go outside of the current usage as a political, rhetorical point owning thing of the others, and you get past the whole catastrophist mentality of it uses too much water and all these sort of things, or if you go away from the horrible planning of putting these in locations where they're loud and they're disrupting societies where people and cultures don't want to have those things around them, those things are going to be sorted out. And then at the end of the day, all these data centers need these things, all the power that they're taking. It has been a way to actually accept and encourage the growth and building of more electricity. And then that electricity is going to be used for positive things. So the more reliable energy people have, the more humans can flourish. So AI, even though the data centers can also be used now for many other things that we've been using data and holding that data in centralized locations, it doesn't necessarily have to be just for AI that might or not create art, might be stealing people's creations in that kind of sense, but actually just practical things that we already have accepted we need technology for. That's going to be more positive. So more electricity, more location to have the data. I think that's a positive thing that's come from just the boom in AI. So for me, that's already a massive change for the good that I think might not be factored in by there's just Michael McKenna here. So let's just get back to finishing this off. Okay, so are we close to meaningful breakthroughs in robotics, nanotechnology, genetics, and a host of other things? Probably, but who can say? I don't know. Who could say that Thomas More was going to create the telegraph at that time? I don't know, but I think we are. So the Forbes 400 is composed mostly of people who make their fortunes in finance or real estate. Some, such as Elon Musk, number one on the list, made fortunes by improving or optimizing others' inventions. Some inherited the cash, good for all of them. It's not a bad thing to be rich, but the absence of inventors on the list suggests that the nation has not produced a bumper crop of Wrights or Edisons or Fords lately. Again, as I mentioned, I discussed Eli Whitney before. Eli Whitney created the cotton gin. The people who got really wealthy off of the cotton gin were the slave owners. Somebody stole the idea from him, and then you had the slave owners. He also created the system of interchangeable parts. that started the military industrial complex in a sense, where they were like, okay, now we can get these. And then the companies who were using that to build weapons and sell them to the military, the factories that were doing these for like different other machines and things like that, they were the ones who made the money. Eli Whitney was not like the top Forbes 400 equivalent of back then. Many people who actually invent the things, very few of them actually managed to completely capitalize and be the person making the most money off of that invention, like the Edisons and the Wrights and the Fords. And the Wrights, like the Wright, how wealthy were the Wright brothers from actually what they invented? So anyway, so I think that's not a signifier of how important or how useful the invention you had is. But I like Elon Musk being named here as well, because it's something that I've been thinking as well. What is it about the United States of America that makes people this way? First of all, Elon Musk, tip of the hat, we need to recognize the most successful African American in the world. Probably one of the most wealthiest person in the world is an African American, is an immigrant who came to America. But at the same point, if Elon Musk had stayed in South Africa, he would not be Elon Musk. There is something about the United States of America that does empower or enable or give the possibility and ability for people to achieve certain levels of things. Doesn't mean everybody's going to achieve it. And in a way, I can see yourself being more frustrated. Like you can grow up in Kenya, but like, man, like this system is not here. The support isn't here. Like the people don't support this, and you can just be dejected. Like I haven't really achieved something. But in America, you see all these people who are around you are able to achieve things in your environment, in your community, and you're not able to do it. So I can understand how some of the people can even be extra more salty because like you live in America. So what have you done with your privilege of living in America versus somebody who lives in like Bangladesh? You'd be like, okay, you don't expect much with that person in Bangladesh. But anyway, so I understand that frustration. But then what is it about those things? How can you actually get whatever it is about the United States of America that creates this sort of inventiveness and this opportunity and these people to maximize and optimize things in that way? And can we crystallize that and have that be something done in other parts of the world? That'd be a positive thing for human flourishing. Okay, so now last couple of paragraphs. Let me see if I can get through these without jumping in. Okay. Is there a reason we have become focused on marginally improving what has been handed down to us? Computers, cars, planes, etc., rather than inventing the next generation of amazing things? Is it too much regulation or too many lawyers to blame? Yes, both. Yes and yes. Are schools focused on paychecks rather than tinkering? Yes and yes. And I would argue you're too focused on paychecks by saying because nobody in the Forbes 400 is an inventor means people are inventing things. Their paycheck does not necessarily mean they're not inventing things. Are we victims of our own prosperity, grown rich and indolent and disinterested in the notion of progress? Yes, 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 and yes. Have we lost the let her rip attitude and that once characterized this great nation of refugees looking for a better deal? Have we misplaced our ability to imagine and create? The only thing one can say for certain is that it is not a sign of national health that we greet a moonshot return from 6 years ago as if it were manna in the desert. The first step is to acknowledge that we have a problem. Then we need to do something about it. What do y'all think about that? And I think like that's the thing. Like the Houston we have a problem thing. Like that's the thing he's kind of going there. So someone in the comments said, "You haven't been paying attention, fella. All American inventions were actually inventions of the 13% of Muslims. It is just white supremacy that says otherwise. Why Americans would still be living in some grass hut if it weren't for all the lovely folk who invented every bit of civilization. And then some were enslaved by and dominated by the cave dwellers?" There's a question mark. So I think that's a troll. I think one thing I would like to bring up is this chart of inventions that I saw. Although I'm kind of wondering with this invention thing because they're talking about patents and copyrights, where it's like, okay, if you haven't patented something, I guess, but this needs to be some kind of way to register what the actual thing is. But let me just get this up before I finish this up. So there's two sources here. Insider Monkey has one. I'll leave a link to that page here where that says there's a methodology. Here's a methodology for this for the 20 countries with the most inventions in all human history. So they have that, and then I'll just read a bit from one by World Population Review, Inventions by Country in 2026. I'll just give a big overview of the top three. Japan with 7,561,395. United States with 6,184,653, China with 4,570,636, South Korea with 2,381,994, Germany with 2,283,121, Russia with 1,526,886. Now, with a lot of these, considering the amount of immigration that goes in, I imagine you could probably take a mill of these from the United States of America if you want to talk about like, oh, you're not American because you're not born in America. That sort of mentality. And again, I think you should be naturalized. But some people left these other countries because they couldn't do the things that they could do and thought they'd be able to do, and came to America and found they could do other things and invented certain things. But that's part of the positive thing of America. America was invented to be a place where people who are not happy with, in some ways, people who aren't happy with the way the world is in other places could come to America and do things in different ways. But I think per capita, counting the populations here, I think, yeah, Japan is still leading on that. China's way more people. So, of course, it's not as, in a sense, it's kind of the thing with the Olympics as well. Like, China should be crushing the Olympics. But for some reasons, like when I see like China's like, oh, yeah, it's top three, I'm like, yeah, you also have like 10% of the world's population or more. Like, a lot of people, you're going to find people who get medals. I think there's something like with the Olympics should be graded on per capita. So it's like, you have your total medals, but like to have the leaders of it should be like, if there's a country with like 1 million people and they have 2 medals, I consider that to be like way more impressive than a country with like 100 million people having 20 medals. Although, wouldn't that be the same if it's 1 million and 20? No, that would be 10 million. Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe per capita was pretty much the same, but I think like that per capita should have some sort of recognition on that. Now, when it comes to inventions, I think that's also, but then now it's like, what kind of inventions? Okay, so Japan here, it says out of total global innovations, Japan has achieved about 10 to 12% of all innovations. Now, that doesn't have the Constitution of the United States of America. Were these inventions, what was about Japan now and its ability to have this? So the Japanese have invented numerous electronic gadgets such as compact discs, DVD, CD-ROM, BD, I don't know what BD stands for here, battery, the lithium ion one, the dry cell battery, mini disc, optical fiber, light emitting diode, that's LED lights, and white LED. And LEDs are fantastic, doing a lot of good things with that. Okay, the US is the hub of all innovative inventions. Most new technology was invented in America. From personal computers, lasers, and mobile phones to video games, photocopiers, and even the internet. Other inventions in the US include hearing aid, microwave ovens, steamboats, submarines, refrigerators, telegraphs, that's what we talked about today, dishwashers, vacuum cleaners, cash registers, electric cookers, electronic TV, credit cards, air conditioners, and much more, like the nuclear bombs that were dropped in Japan, which is number one, it's still winning Japan, number one. China, some famous inventions are papermaking, gunpowder, printing, and the compass, silk, tea production, alcohol, mechanical clock, earthquake detector, porcelain, bronze kite, the kite, sea drill, toothbrush, paper money, acupuncture, and others. There's something about here with different cultures where it's like, because they had, what was it? Yeah, because they had porcelain. I don't know. There's something with like glass wasn't invented due to some reason. Let me double check if I can find that. And you see, again, this is a misconception. Again, the internet and this ability to have this communication is something that I'm saying that has changed a lot, because this is a misconception. The claim that porcelain prevented the invention of glass in China is a historical misconception. But how many of these old wives' tales sort of things have people just believed for their whole lives with no negative meaning for it, but because somebody said this thing, it sounded convincing, it sounded like it made enough sense, and then they actually stuck with that thing. How many things, like I talked about with America, do we have other countries that they were just, this is how our country was began, and we didn't do those bad things, we didn't do those good, or whatever, that kind of misconception, and then they build on a foundation that's not real, whereas now you have the ability to communicate the way things actually were. So they did not fail to invent glass because of porcelain, but rather chose not to prioritize it due to existing technological alternatives. They just had other things that were doing. So like, okay, we didn't need glass that much. And then now with other places that didn't have that, they decided, let's go and create like telescopes and microscopes and other things, because they found different ways to use glass. So you choosing to do one thing in one way is a different way than doing it another way. Okay, so that's one thing that's in that. But then that still exists right now. Like I know in the United States of America, people were really stuck. Credit cards was mentioned here. They're stuck to using credit cards. So for them, when mobile money like was being brought in, they were not used to that. They liked card, cash, or credit. Credit, cash, or checks. That's what they were using. They had the banks, they trusted that form away. So they didn't really have, people had cell phones, people had that technology, but they didn't want to use cell phones in that way. They were still like, okay, it's pretty much for calling or for texting. It's pretty much a walkie-talkie sort of thing, communication thing alone. But here in Kenya, people didn't really have bank accounts that much. Cash was being used in a certain sense. Credit cards and checks was definitely not something used. So when Safaricom, which is the biggest mobile service provider here in I think sub-Saharan Africa, it's probably one of the top ones in the world now, just how massive it is. They brought in this thing called M-Pesa, where you just have, when you have your SIM card to the phone line, you can go to all these different locations all around Kenya, and there's so many locations. You go to pretty much any kiosk, most stores, you can just go there and you can say, okay, can I upload M-Pesa? And then you just take like 500 shillings and you just put them on your phone. And then if your parents are in the countryside, in the village, it used to take like 10 hours to drive there. The roads are not the best. You should find it was so hard for you to get there. But then now you just send the money out there. And then your grandparent or whatever is in the village, they just go to the kiosk there and they get the money out and they can buy things like that. You can be in other countries and you can use M-Pesa now using the other things. But that was something that was completely accepted and embraced by the cultures here, by the community here, because they didn't have they're not predisposed to using cash, credit, and checks. So there's still things in America that America the way it is might not be as open and situated to doing certain things, to taking on new things in certain ways. And this could be a situation where like I'm a creative, I'm into the arts, and that's one of the things that I'm seeing like right now in the United States of America. There's already an established environment of the creative fields. A lot of creatives who are already established, so the pushback to using AI, if AI can create art or in the fields of arts and creativity, is a lot bigger there than it is in the rest of the world. Whereas the rest of the world will adapt to that stuff. They will adapt to it. People are going to use that. And if Americans are like, no, we have to use no AI in our stuff, they might be held back in certain ways. So there might be certain ways, because a certain mentality, certain ways of looking and approaching certain things might get you to not really adopt to new forms of technology, maximize other things. But the way the world works right now, if something's invented in America and they not use it, if glass is invented in China and they're like, we're already using porcelain, people have the ability to take that equivalent of glass today in other places where they're not using porcelain and maximize that glass eventually. So that's one thing that's happening. I think we're going to have these sort of ways where it's like you're not necessarily going to have this inventiveness limited in one location or the other. And there's also just a thing where people plateau. You get to a certain level where maybe you plateau, and then after that plateau, you could climb up again and get to a higher level, or you could drop back down and not be as high anymore, or you just maintain at that level. So that could be something that's happening with the inventiveness of the United States of America. But I don't think that's the case. I think there is going to be a chance of a lot more going on. So yeah, that was it for Made America 250. As I said, on the screen, there was a speed drawing of Samuel Morse. I might actually eventually also do the, I also might do the telegraph, the first telegraph in this N1 Bache sort of aesthetically pleasing design for the N1 Bache series, and just talk a bit more about the telegraph on a separate video or something, or just add to the Made America 250, because I'm going to have at least one person per 10 years, but some might have more drawings and more images, more things in there as I go. I will be doing this for, I think this is the sixth one, so for at least 19 more weeks. Have some ideas of people who will be already in those ones. Like I mentioned, Honest Abe is probably going to be in there. It's going to be other things. Probably is going to be something with the moon landing, because I think was a major thing that will come up again. The Wright brothers, that's another thing. So if you guys have any ideas of people or places or projects that you think help define what made America what it is today to you, let me know, and I might include that in the discussions of these decades of going through Made America 250 in this series. So for now, just check out the Redbubble store for now. I'm going to look about getting independent external places to be supplying some of these merchandise and more of a limited run things for some of these designs. But if I've posted it on Redbubble, I will keep whatever has been on Redbubble. So you can check that out for now. Links are going to be wherever you're listening to this profile, whatever, low bar, if you're in YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, or BitChute. You're on this website. If you're getting this from the blog, mastodon.wordpress.com, you can also find the links below for other things, or you can follow links on these other sources to the blog, where there'll be links to other things that I've mentioned, things I've been reading. You can find out more information about this. But yeah, I think that's it for now, and I'll be back again sometime next week with another one of the Made America 250 series. So guys, gals, and everybody else in between, goodbye.